The NCAA is asleep at the wheel, and it's potentially costing transfer Tyon Grant-Foster the chance to suit up for Gonzaga this season.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Well, there are 6 weeks officially until the start of the college basketball season. We're going to talk about why on earth Tyon Grant-Foster is still not with the Gonzaga basketball program. He has missed media day. He has missed the start of classes, all because the NCAA has yet to rule on a decision regarding a waiver to get him an extra year of eligibility. We're going to break it all down on today's show. We're also going to talk about what a future looks like for Gonzaga without Tyon Grant-Foster. Who steps into the projected starting lineup? Whose roles may change in that situation? We'll get to that in the second segment. And then we're closing out the show on a more positive note, continuing our series talking about players from every state in the Mark Few era. Today, we're talking about the 4 Zags from the state of Nevada who have played for Mark Few and ranking them again to close out the show. But we start today again with the Tyon Grant-Foster lack of news. I was going to say the Tyon Grant-Foster news, but there is no news. That is what the news is. Unfortunately, it has been an exasperating process. For those who don't recall, Tyon Grant-Foster committed to Gonzaga out of the transfer portal on May 28th. May turned to June, June turned to July, July turned to August, August turned to what is now late September. And there has not been a single change on this stat, at least not a publicly known change. I do think that is an important caveat. It is possible that there have been conversations that have happened with the NCAA and Tyon with the NCAA and Gonzaga. I mean, there have been conversations, but it's possible there's more out there that we do not know. But every source that I have talked to, every communication I have had has not yielded any indication as to what is happening with this current waiver process for Tyon Grant-Foster. But what it means is that Tyon, despite committing to Gonzaga, is not enrolled in classes. He is not on campus. He is not practicing with his teammates. He is not with his coaching staff. He is not getting to do the things that a player should get to do with his team. But more than that, and what is frustrating to me and should be frustrating to many of you, for me in particular, as somebody who's worked in college athletic academic support for 5 years prior to starting this career, this is an institution in the NCAA that prides themselves still in the NIL era, in the transfer portal era. They still pride themselves on being student first, student athlete. It's always been a bit of a, I don't want to say misnomer. The vast majority of student athletes across the Division I landscape of college athletics are student focused. But when things like this happen, where you are delaying a decision for whatever reason that is preventing a young man who wants to be in school. Obviously, he wants to be at Gonzaga because he wants to play basketball. We're not going to pretend that he's insanely invested in the academic program that he wants to be in. Maybe he is, I don't know. But he wants to be in classes, and the NCAA is not letting him. An institution that supposedly cares more about that. That is not happening. And right now, I mean, Gonzaga just had their picture day. They had their media day. We still don't know the status on Tyon Grant-Foster. We don't know if he's going to be cleared to play this year. We don't know if he's going to be cleared to play starting next semester. We don't know if he's going to not be cleared to play. It's possible that Tyon Grant-Foster has already played his last game of college basketball and that he will never suit up for Gonzaga. Every day that goes by where we do not get an update on this situation makes it more and more likely that he either will not play at all for Gonzaga or that he will not play until the semester break, which means he would miss the entire non-conference slate, get enrolled in classes starting in January, and be able to play for Gonzaga for the final 3 months of the season. There is Not a precedence for this necessarily, but as a reminder, a few years ago when Gonzaga had the longest offseason in what seemed like college basketball history, Gonzaga signed Pavle Stosic, who spent 1 year at Gonzaga and will be at Pepperdine this upcoming season. Stosic did not come to campus until right around this time. I remember distinctly filming a 1-minute short video on YouTube about Stosic's commitment on my birthday, which is Tuesday. So we know that this has happened before, and Stosic was enrolled in classes and was able to start right away. He participated for Gonzaga at Craziness in the Kennel. He didn't play very much for Gonzaga that year, but not because he was ineligible to do so, simply because he was not brought in to be a big-time player for this program. So it is possible still, as I record this in the afternoon on the 21st of September, it is possible that Gonzaga could still get Tyon Grant-Foster on campus, get him enrolled in classes. He'd be a grad student. There's not as many requirements in terms of courses that you have to take once you have graduated and you are in grad school. It is possible they could get this all done and still get him in a situation where he could play for Gonzaga on November 3rd against Texas Southern. But again, every day that goes by, that becomes less and less likely. Now, in terms of the status, if you're maybe new to this conversation or just want a refresher, the reason that this is happening effectively is that Tyon Grant-Foster has been playing college basketball for a really long time. Or rather, he began playing college basketball a long time ago. His first season playing college basketball was 2018-19. Yeah, that was a long time ago. We're not going to pretend it wasn't. Drew Timme had yet to set foot on Gonzaga's campus as a basketball player when Tyon Grant-Foster suited up for his junior college, Indian Hills Junior College, in 2018-19. He played 2 years at the JUCO, transferred to Kansas, played at Kansas in the 2020-21 season where he appeared in 22 games. Then he transferred to DePaul. He spent 2 years enrolled at DePaul, but he only played one half of one basketball game before suffering a cardiac event at halftime of his first game in a DePaul uniform. He then suffered another cardiac event a few months later and ended up missing all of that season and the entire next season. He then emerged about 16 months later at Grand Canyon and played 2 years at Grand Canyon, including, of course, being the WAC Player of the Year in the 23-24 season, where he averaged 20 points per game, was one of the best pure scorers in the entire country that year for the Lopes. Now, the new rules for the NCAA, last December, they made a rule that says if you have junior college, if you've used junior college years, you will be given a blanket waiver to get an extra year of eligibility while they basically go through the process of determining how they want to handle junior college eligibility going forward. This is how Michael Ajayi, who played 2 years at JUCO, 1 year at Pepperdine, and 1 year at Gonzaga, this is why he is at Butler instead of being out in the professional ranks. He was given an extra year of eligibility, and he is using it by transferring to Butler. So in that case, Grant-Foster's junior college year is basically the 2 years count as just 1 year. The year that Grant-Foster spent at Kansas was 2020-21. That is the COVID year. Everybody who played in the COVID year has been given an extra year of eligibility. So basically, his 2 years at JUCO and his 1 year at Kansas should only count for one total season of eligibility against Grant-Foster. He then spent 2 years at DePaul, but only played one game. Neither of those years should count against him because he only played one game. And then he played the 2 years at Grand Canyon. So by my count, that's 3 years. That means he should have a fourth year of eligibility. It is not quite that simple, but that is a basic way to break down the situation at this point. The reason it is not quite that simple is that one of the other NCAA rules is that they are trying to enforce their 5-year window, which means that you get 5 years to play, to use 4 years of eligibility. Basically, they don't want exactly what's happening with Grant-Foster, where you've actually been enrolled in college and you've been a college basketball player for well more than 5 years. So this is why there is a hiccup. Grant-Foster is going to be 26 in March. He's going to be one of the oldest players in college basketball if he does get eligibility. I can understand why the NCAA has taken their time trying to figure that out. But there's precedence that points to Grant-Foster that indicates he should get his eligibility here. Devin Cambridge has played 141 Division I college basketball games. He has played those across each of the past 6 seasons. He is already well past the 5-year window. Grant-Foster has played in 83 Division I games, 83 D1 games. That's not even 3 full years. And again, you shouldn't be counting those 22 games at Kansas either. Obviously, you should be counting one of the JUCO years, so that kind of wipes that out. But Chad Baker-Mazara, who's transferring to USC, he's 2 months older than Grant-Foster. He played 119 career games. Again, Grant-Foster only played 83. I understand the timing. I understand that having started his college career in 2018 does feel like a player who maybe should be done with college basketball. I understand that feeling. But to potentially deny Tyon Grant-Foster a waiver because he missed 2 years with a heart condition feels insanely misguided. A player who wants to play college basketball, a player who committed to a program in late May, a player who has played less games than most guys who are rising seniors. If you started your college career, you played 30 games as a freshman, 30 games as a sophomore, 30 games as a junior. You've played more Division I basketball games than Tyon Grant-Foster. And for a player who's missed so much time, who overcame he was told by multiple doctors he would never play basketball again, and he came back and scored 20 points per game in a good basketball conference. That is a story that should be celebrated. Instead, the NCAA is considering not letting him play anymore. The rules are there for a reason. The 5-year window is there for a reason. I don't even really disagree with the concept, but this is not a situation where the NCAA should be preventing this player from continuing to play basketball. I say that, of course, as a Gonzaga basketball fan, but I also say that as a Tyon Grant-Foster fan and as a fan of somebody overcoming incredible odds to continue his career and being potentially denied the ability to do so by a committee that should care about their student-athlete welfare and seemingly is not doing so based on how they were handling this situation. I wish I had more information for you. I truly do. But right now, what I can tell you is that Gonzaga is absolutely preparing for at least part of the season, if not the entire season, to happen without Tyon Grant-Foster. So what is that going to look like? What does that do to the Gonzaga starting lineup? Who does that elevate into a bigger role for this team? We're going to talk about that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere on the app. One of the great things about FanDuel is that it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little spice to your Sundays. The Zags national championship odds remain at plus 3,500. I'll tell you right now, if those drop suddenly, that means that Vegas might know something about Grant-Foster that we do not know. But right now, plus 3,500 if you think Mark Few's taking home a title in 2026. And if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked on Zags podcast. And we are continuing our conversation about the frustrating situation that has unfolded for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs in Spokane without Tyon Grant-Foster, who is still waiting for an approval from the NCAA to have another year of eligibility to suit up for the Zags this season. We laid out the whats, the whys, the hows, what's going on with this situation, what we know, what we don't know, which is primarily the situation, unfortunately, for Grant-Foster in that first segment. And now what I want to do is a conversation that I will admit I have been purposely avoiding, in part because I don't want to feel like a jinx, but in part because I knew that this conversation will have to happen if Grant-Foster does not get his waiver approved. And now, even though we don't know yet, I want to talk a little bit about what this might look like for Gonzaga. And again, obviously, once we find out the situation, if Grant-Foster is approved, whether it's for starting in January, whether it's starting right now, we'll have that conversation then. But right now, it's starting to trend more towards, hey, this is maybe not a player who's going to be suiting up for Gonzaga, at least not until January, if at all, this year. So what does that look like? Well, it changes a lot for Gonzaga. The starting lineup will change because we're projecting overwhelmingly that Tyon Grant-Foster would be part of the starting lineup, assuming that even if he gets approved for eligibility tomorrow and doesn't show up to campus until, the middle of the week, I still think he starts for Gonzaga. He's that good of a player. So it changes the starting lineup. Gonzaga loses a key downhill scorer. I think that's a big part of this, is that most of the scorers on this team who are not the bigs are either three-point shooters or facilitators. They're not like go get a bucket type scorers. That is what Tyon Grant-Foster is. That is why the Zags brought him in, was because that was an element that was missing on the roster. The same reason that Caleb Battle was on the team last year. That is the role that Grant-Foster was supposed to fill. Without him, you still have talent, you still have depth, you still have great players, but you do not have a go-to, give him the ball, let him create for himself scorer outside of the bigs. That is the biggest loss by far. You also lose a very experienced player, and you lose a good defender. Grant-Foster averaged over 1.5 steals and blocks each of the last 2 seasons. Yes, he was in the WAC, but the WCC, while it's better than the WAC, it's not dramatically better. Grant-Foster is a good defensive player. He's long, he's rangy, he's athletic. You lose a great scorer and a good offensive player and a ton of experience on the wing without Grant-Foster. Let's take a look at a few potential starting lineups that could happen without Grant-Foster for the Zags. Number one, I think, is the most obvious one. We're projecting here on Locked On Zags, many other places as well, Braden Smith, Adam Miller, Grant-Foster, Graham Ike, and Braden Huff to be your starting 5. If you take Tyon Grant-Foster out of the mix, I think the easiest solution is to insert one of either Jalen Warley or Steele Venters directly into that spot. Tyon Grant-Foster is 6'7", Steele Venters is 6'7", Jalen Warley is 6'7", some places say 6'6". Either way, you're basically keeping the same starting lineup, the same positions. Nobody else's role has to change all that much. If you start with Jalen Warley, who I think is the most likely candidate to start, I do not like this lineup. I don't like this lineup because you have Adam Miller is a very good three-point shooter. At least he was last year. You have Braden Smith, who's a good facilitator, good pick and roll guy, not a great scorer. And then you have Jalen Warley, who's a good facilitator, a good kind of pick and roll guy. He can navigate the screens well, but he's not a scorer at all. I mean, he averaged like 7 points per game. He's not a three-point shooter. You have no floor spacing, and you don't really have any scoring outside of your bigs. You have 2 great facilitators, and who are they going to facilitate? Adam Miller's kind of projects to me as more of like a float to the corner, look for your open shots. If you get a 3, great. If you can get a guy in the air and pump fake and drive to the rim, and great. But otherwise, I don't think Adam Miller's creating his own shot. That's not what he's here to do. So if you start him and Warley together, you do not have enough offense in the backcourt, and you are extremely reliant on the front court to score the vast majority of your points. That's going to happen regardless, but you need more scoring on the perimeter. I don't think a lineup with Warley, Miller, and Smith starting necessarily gets you that. It also puts a ton of pressure on Miller to be an elite three-point shooter, which maybe he will be, but if he's not, woof, that lineup could be problematic. All of this is true, by the way, if you insert Emmanuel Innocente, except for instead of Jalen Warley, except that your lineup's a little bit smaller and has a little bit less playmaking to it. So what about if it's Steele Venters? Now you have 2 great three-point shooters. Adam Miller, Steele Venters, both those guys project to be 40+% three-point shooters. You have a great facilitator in Braden Smith. This offense hums. You can space the floor. You can give a ton of room to Graham or Braden on the block. You have a ton of spacing that really creates an offense that should score 100 points a game. The problem, this team is very weak defensively. If you start Miller and Venters together with Braden Smith, you have an undersized guard. You have 2 undersized guards who are hard workers defensively, but are very small, similar to Nembhard and Hickman last year. And then you have Steele Venters, who does not project to be a good defensive player at all. And then you have Ike and Huff, who are not great defenders. This lineup you'd have a lot of games like the Santa Clara game, where you lose like 104-99. I just do not think that team is good enough defensively to be this team's primary lineup and starting 5. So what about inserting Mario Saint-Superi into the starting lineup in place of Tyon Grant-Foster? It'd be fun. You'd have Adam Miller, Braden Smith, Mario Saint-Superi, and the two bigs. The problem, way too small. Way too small. Smith, Miller, and Saint-Superi are all 6'3" or 6'4". You just cannot start a lineup that small against the vast majority of teams in college basketball. Bigger teams, Oregon, UCLA, Kentucky, would just go to work on this lineup. Even though I think this lineup is good, it has good floor spacing, it has great playmaking, it's too defensively limited because of the size of the three players. So here is what I would propose. A little unique, but I think it could work. You start Smith and Saint-Superi together in the backcourt, and then you start Steele Venters at the 3. And then, of course, Graham Ike and Braden Huff at the 4 and the 5. This would allow Adam Miller and Jalen Warley to come off the bench, along with Emmanuel Innocente, as well as, of course, Ismaila Diani and the two freshmen. I think this lineup could work. Smith and Saint-Superi gives you 2 point guards. It gives you 2 playmakers. It gives you that lineup that Mark Few's always loved, which is those 2 point guard lineups. It gives you a great 3-point shooter in Steele Venters who can space the floor, who can attack closeouts, who can make backdoor cuts. And then it, of course, gives you the 2 bigs as well. You have a ton of gravity with those 2 bigs. That allows Steele Venters to get a ton of open looks, and you have 2 great playmakers on the floor. Mario, we'll see what kind of 3-point shooter he is, but if he can space the floor too, that's great. I also think Mario is going to be a better defensive player than Adam Miller, albeit it's not a dramatic difference. The main difference with Mario coming into this lineup is more playmaking. You get more playmaking, but you are still challenged defensively with the 2 undersized guards and with Steele starting at the 3. But I think that works because you have Warley and Innocente coming off the bench. Adam Miller becomes a spark plug 3-point scorer off the bench. I don't hate this. There's still a challenge because either you're starting Venters and you're giving up defense, or you're starting Warley and you're giving up offense. The reason that Tyon Grant-Foster is so valuable to this team is that he does not hurt you in either of those spots. He's not a great 3-point shooter, but he is a great offensive player and a very good defender. That is why he is on this roster. That is why it is exasperating that we're having this conversation, because we do not know if one of the team's biggest offseason additions is going to suit up for them or not. In terms of the actual rotation, not a lot changes. There are 9 players competing for spots in Gonzaga's rotation without Tyon Grant-Foster. I mean, there's 11 players competing, but there's 9 that I think are going to be in the rotation. You have Smith, you have Adam Miller, you have Mario Saint-Superi, you have Steele Venters, you have Jalen Warley, you have Emmanuel Innocente, and then you have the 3 bigs, Braden Huff, Graham Ike, and Ismaila Diani. That's a 9-man rotation right there, and that is without Tyon Grant-Foster. I think that those are your 9 guys. I think Emmanuel Innocente is going to see more playing time if Grant-Foster is not playing. I think that Venters is going to see more playing time. I think that it could increase the playing time for maybe even Davis Fogel steps in. I still think he's 10th. 10th man historically doesn't play a whole lot in Gonzaga's lineups, but I think he goes from 11 to 10 in this situation. Parker Jefferson, we'll see. I'm very intrigued by whether he's going to play a role as a backup 4 or not. I think that Venters could play some backup 4, but I do think that if Tyon Grant-Foster is not eligible, then that will put more time where Venters is playing the 3, less opportunity for him to play the 4. So I do think that could clear out some more space for Jefferson to play a bigger role on this team. So there are some other kind of down the lineup changes that could happen without Grant-Foster. We will dig more into this if the situation arises where we know that Grant-Foster is not going to be playing for this team this upcoming season. But for now, we're just going to continue to keep our ear to the grindstone, hopefully be able to give you an update on this situation in the very, very near future. Like I said, we are closing out the show on a more positive note, continuing our series talking about Mark Few era Zags from various states and ranking the best players from each of those states. Today, we're talking Nevada, which has 4 former Zags who are from Nevada, including 2 players in the NBA. We're going to discuss this quartet to close out the show. Coming up here in just a second. Folks, you need to know that your favorite neighborhood spots, they run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's the local sports bar packed on game days, the coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. And when neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. So what does supporting your community look like? Spending money there doesn't just support the business, it supports the people behind it and the community around it. Those local spots are what make the neighborhood feel like home, and so many of them run on Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/lockedoncollege to learn more, but before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. All right, folks, segment 3, closing out the show, moving away from our conversation about Tyon Grant-Foster to instead continue our series where we're ranking the best Gonzaga players in the Mark Few era from various states. This is number 8 on our list. We have done Oregon, California, Minnesota, Idaho, Illinois, California, and Texas. I think I said California twice. Colorado is the other state that we have done there. So this is number 8 on that list. Again, we're trying to pick any states that have had 3 or more players from those states. We only got a couple more states left to talk about here. And then if we get some time, we might do Canada. We have to do Washington still. That's going to be a full show there. Maybe some other European countries as well. Today, of course, talking about Nevada, mostly the Las Vegas area for our quartet of Zags from that state. And again, kind of always like to look at the current roster. Is there anybody on the team that could jump onto this list or move up on this list in the future? No players currently on the roster from Nevada. The Zags have had some recruiting targets they've missed on in the past, a notable one being Didon Thomas back in 2023 from Henderson area. Also Pop Isaacs, who is at Texas A&M this year. He was a target for Gonzaga early on in that recruiting cycle. I think it was a 2022 recruiting cycle for Isaacs. Either way, they have pursued some players from Nevada that they have not landed that would have been on this list. But for the most part, when they've gone after guys in Nevada, they have landed them. Here are our 4 players from Nevada for the Gonzaga Bulldogs, again, in the Mark Few era. Starting with number 1, this was a pretty easy one to order, although there are 2 very good players. But we got to go with Julian Strawther at number 1. Julian Strawther, of course, spent 3 years at Gonzaga. He's from Paradise, Nevada, was at Gonzaga from 2020 through 2023, played 94 games in a Gonzaga uniform, started 68 of them. All told, averaged about 11 points, 4.5 boards, shot 38.5% from 3. He made the All-WCC first team in 2023. He also made the All-WCC tournament team and the NCAA tournament All-Region team. He was also a preseason Naismith and Wooden Award finalist or watch list candidate that year as well. And he delivered. He delivered as a junior for the Zags, 15.6 boards, 1.5 assists, shot 41% from 3. That junior year was far and away his most productive year. He followed a very typical Gonzaga trajectory, played very little as a freshman, played a big role as a sophomore, and then blossomed into a legitimate star as a junior. He was part of the infamous Tricky Trio, a recruiting class that also included Dominic Harris and, of course, one-and-done star Jalen Suggs. And Strawther was known primarily for being one of the most clutch players in Gonzaga basketball history. As a junior, he hit a pair of game-winning threes, one of them against BYU at the Marriott Center, and then one of them against UCLA in the NCAA tournament. It was the same play, Strawther bringing the ball up the floor, Drew Timme set to screen for him at the top of the key. Strawther pulls up while that guy is still fighting through the screen. He was probably about 3, 4, maybe 5 feet behind the three-point line on both those shots, right at the top of the key. Bang, knocked them both down, sent BYU back home with a loss at the Marriott Center. It was one of, if not Gonzaga's last game at the Marriott Center. And then, of course, UCLA continued the history of Gonzaga versus UCLA epic matchups, of course, dating all the way back 20-ish years ago with Adam Morrison, and then Jalen Suggs' shot, many phenomenal regular season games, and then Julian Strawther knocking them out to send Gonzaga to the Elite Eight, where they lost to UConn a couple of years ago. That's the main thing Julian Strawther was known for. He's also been an outstanding NBA player, was drafted late in the first round of the 2023 NBA draft, and ended up with the Denver Nuggets, where he spent the last 2 years, blossomed into a very good player off the bench for the Nuggets last year. Number 2 on our list, another current NBA player, Zach Collins. Zach Collins spent 1 year at Gonzaga, 2016-17 season, also from the Las Vegas area from Bishop Gorman High School. Played 39 games for the Zags, averaged about 17 minutes, 10.6 boards, 2 blocks per game, shot 67% from on 2-pointers. He was all WCC second team as a freshman. He was also on the WCC all freshman team and, like Strawther, the NCAA all tournament team, because Zach Collins had some very similar to Strawther famous NCAA tournament moments. Even in just 1 year for Zach Collins, he had the very, very famous, for lack of a better word, blocked shot against Northwestern, where his hands very obviously went into the net to block that shot. The officials missed it. It was a big momentum swing in favor of Gonzaga, and they did not lose to a 9 seed and instead went all the way to the national championship game, in part because Zach Collins was incredible against South Carolina. I remembered that he was good in this game. I don't know that I remembered that he had 14 points, 13 rebounds, and 6 blocks off the bench to have a 14-point double-double with 6 blocks in a Final Four game is obscene. Absolutely ridiculous levels of efficiency, productivity, and just moxie for a true freshman to be able to do that. Collins led the WCC in games played, blocks, 2-point field goal, and true shooting percentage in his lone season at Gonzaga. He was also the first 5-star player to commit to Gonzaga out of high school. First one. Jalen Suggs, of course, joined him. Chet Holmgren joined. Hunter Salas joined. We'll see if there's more that join after that. But Zach Collins was a true 5-star player who committed to Gonzaga. That was not something that had happened prior to him doing so in 2016. Collins was selected 10th overall in the 2017 NBA draft, ended up with the Portland Trailblazers, has also spent time with the San Antonio Spurs, and is now currently with the Chicago Bulls on what has been a solid NBA career for the big man. 2 more guys on our list to talk about here. Next up is Alex Hernandez, also from Las Vegas. Hernandez spent 2 years at Gonzaga after starting his career at Casper Junior College. He was at Gonzaga in 2000 and 2001, appeared in 64 games in a Gonzaga uniform, averaged about 17 minutes per game, 6 points, 3 boards, 1 assist, shot 37.5% from 3. 6'4" guard who was really productive when he was on the floor for Gonzaga. He just happened to be with Gonzaga when they had Dan Dickow and Blake Stepp. So he just was the third guard, surrounded by really, really talented guards very early in Mark Few's tenure, very early in the kind of annals of Gonzaga basketball history, at least the relevant parts of Gonzaga basketball history. I also wonder if Hernandez had been in a different era. I mean, he shot 37.5% from 3 in his 2 years at Gonzaga, but he only took 32 threes. That was about a half an attempt per game. Kind of makes me wonder what would have happened to a player who was that good of a 3-point shooter if he'd come along 15 years, 20 years later when the 3-point revolution had happened. And then last up on our list here, only including him because of how recently he was on the roster, but he didn't actually ever play for Gonzaga. That would be Graydon Lemke, also from Paradise, Las Vegas area, Nevada. Spent last year at Gonzaga, the 24-25 season, but he redshirted and has since hit the transfer portal and landed at Belmont, where he will suit up for the Bruins this upcoming season. Lemke was a 6'11" freshman who joined Gonzaga as a walk-on, despite a very productive high school career. And there was some kind of potential of like, hey, maybe he could be somebody who develops into like a legitimate player for Gonzaga, not like a, Drew Timme or anything like that, but maybe like a 3rd or 4th big who gives you real minutes off the bench. And he may have been able to do that, but he opted instead to transfer, go to Belmont. Excited to see what he can do for the Bruins. So kind of no choice but to put him last on the list because he literally never actually set foot on the floor for Gonzaga, but wanted to include him here as he is, of course, a Gonzaga player from Las Vegas. So it counts even if he didn't suit up. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We'll be back with a couple more shows this week, continuing this series, talking about where players are ranking players based on where they're from in the Mark Few era. We'll also hopefully get you up to date. If there's any news updates on Tyon Grant-Foster, I'll keep you up to date on recruiting news around the college basketball landscape and Gonzaga space as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.